the Ascendant Show.
You know, I'm mentored by this guy, and he says this all the time. So the truth is that the decisions you make now, in the small things and obviously the big, they will affect your children for years and years and years to come. And that men don't take that as seriously today is a real traumatic thing. From fiscal stuff to relational stuff to what kind of skills you decide to be interested in and then pass the baton on. These things will have long-reaching effects by way of your family and your children. And it's an overwhelming thought. You know, men need to start taking that stuff much more seriously because it's true. It's true whether we want to sort of ostrich our head in the sand and pretend like it isn't, stick our fingers in the ears and hum some feminine tune in our modern-day life. But the truth is that's all true whether we want it to be true or not. And the ramifications and consequences that come from not taking that seriously are just as real now as they've ever been.
It's extremely overwhelming. I mean, we are kind of conditioned to live in the now. I mean, the you only live once thing is basically just live in the now, don't think about the future propaganda.
Thoroughly unbiblical, by the way.
You're not even kidding. It's just next level evil. I mean, I think to some extent maybe, you know, you're not really supposed to dwell that much in the future in the sense that you're supposed to trust God for what turns out. That's a kind of pat answer. But the truth is, you do have to plan for the future to the best of your ability, although most of the time it doesn't work out the way you plan. Well, when it comes to decisions like, do I have an affair, you know, do I do this horrible thing just because I feel like doing it now, or, you know, do I just,
right.
Just there's a lot of immediate things that you do that you could probably excuse away because this is my life and I'm going to do what I want. That does have a really bad long-term effect on the people around you.
Definitely.
I think self-control is completely taboo, and denying yourself any kind of pleasure is taboo, even if it would affecting your children negatively. I mean, they're yours, and they're like handbags, you know? They should just experience your life.
You know, I just wrote a song called Power in Our Weakness, and that's 2 Corinthians where he's talking about how, you know, you're essentially made weak and I'm made strong in that weakness, and that concept is very, very foreign to a godless mind. And it just sounds so strange. But I started thinking about this, and I have not yet experienced this season of life, but having a child, if you realize that you have a sinful nature and that your goal is to continuously shed that nature so that God's Spirit can then move in you because that's all the power, the rest of it's just sort of a liability, you come to realize as you mature in your faith. So if the goal is to become more and more selfless, less self-aggrandizing, less self-deifying, all these things, children are the final step in that process if you're allowing it to happen. I was thinking about the other day, and this is like extremely politically incorrect, but there's some study that just came out, and it said an enormous amount of single mothers are below the poverty line and are without men. And when I was growing up, I was just on the tail end of where if you left a woman, if you impregnated a woman in high school or something, and you just bailed out, there was extreme shame, say 5 or 10 years before I was alive. But then by the time I got to be in high school and stuff, you could do that as long as you sent a check. It was like you could villainize the woman. Oh, she's a nightmare witch, and you got to understand my plight, so I got to get out. But, you know, I'm taking care of my own.
She tricked me.
Yeah, she tricked me. Exactly. So then you could send a check, and then everybody's like, and then society's like, oh, okay. Now, you don't even have to send a check. You just completely bail out. Of course, all this happens in the midst of this, like, hyper, you know, women power. Women are getting this, women are getting that. Women are breaking glass ceilings left and right. And I'm starting to think, now this stat comes out. Here's the interesting thing. This is the stat that I thought was amazing, that the National Organization for Women was lauding and praising. If a married woman is in the workplace, she makes an average of $70,000 in America. If a woman is single and she's in the workplace, she makes an average of $25,000. That's how much of a drop it is. And they're praising single motherhood, and they're praising all this stuff. Here you have all these men, they're out of work. An out-of-work man is just a sorrow man, you know, especially if he has any pride. I'm assuming this man isn't like a video game couch potato loser. I'm assuming he's just out of work because the Obama economy is giving it to him from behind. So here's this guy out of work. Now, 40% of the women are taking the jobs that men once worked to provide for the family. It was once the man who would go out, the women would raise children. Now, this whole paradigm shifted. So the whole apple cart is just all over the ground now. You know, you got all these men that are completely irresponsible, but then at the same time, the whole infrastructure that allowed them to be responsible is broken. The entire thing, the whole gender social engineering, the ramifications of this are just massive. And the dialogue is never had. And I'm talking about real stuff. PC be damned. This stuff is affecting real lives. You got single mothers who are raising children, and the fact that they're only raised by that mother is going to wreak havoc on their life. You and I both know that. I tip my hat to that woman getting it done. Don't get me wrong. I'm not slandering her, but these are just the realities of the world that we live in. So all this stuff, people don't spend enough time talking about how damaging this stuff is and how the fallout of this is huge.
This is a perfect example, one of many, how common sense isn't so common. I mean, I know that's cliche to say that, but again, the destruction of the family and then gender roles blurring. This is all by design. This is all
it is
part of the bigger plan to destroy. How does a place that primarily does abortions become some place that gets a reputation as being a good thing, pre-screenings for cancer, and that's what their reputation is for, when in actuality they're slaughterhouses? I mean, that sounds a little polarizing, but the truth is that Planned Parenthood is wearing a mask. So feminism is just a different.
Very true.
It's basically the Morlocks and the Eloi. They're just sheep, and this is what we've become. Except instead of just kind of feed, the Morlocks would just periodically feed the Eloi, and the Eloi wouldn't question where the food came from. The way that the media and the elitists are kind of doing it now is they're feeding their ego. So your ego is now your central diet. And as long as that's well fed, as long as you have someone to sleep with, and you have your little tiny world taken care of, you're not going to question the big picture. You're not going to question the big decisions that are being made for you.
Right.
You're not going to dig deep enough to even wonder about these things. You're not going to say, I look to my left, I don't know my neighbors. I look to my right, that's just a woman with 5 kids. The house behind me, they're on food stamps, and they're the dad is cheating the mother, and she's not going to question, wait a second, how did this happen? Well, what happened to, the way things were at our absolute paramount till now? What happened? You can pinpoint it to several different things. All of them involve removing God, removing faith from the popular culture.
Lights will